The glass doors of Harrington and Blythe Bank slid open with a soft whisper, and Naomi Reed stepped inside like she had every right to be there, because she did. The downtown branch was polished to perfection, marble floors reflecting golden chandeliers, framed oil paintings of city founders lining the walls, soft classical music playing just loud enough to feel expansive. Men in tailored suits spoke in low voices near the investment desks. A woman in heels signed documents beside a private banker who smiled too widely. Naomi walked past them all. Her heels clicked with quiet confidence. She wore a navy power suit, minimal jewelry, and her natural curls were pulled back into a sleek bun. In her hand was a leather folder. In her mind was a simple task: withdraw $250,000 for a commercial property closing scheduled that afternoon. She approached the front desk. "Good morning," she said pleasantly. The teller, a young woman with a tight smile, glanced up. "How can I help you?" "I need to initiate a certified transfer. $250,000. Same-day release." The teller's smile flickered. "That's a large withdrawal," she said. "Yes, may I see your ID?" Naomi handed it over, calmly. The teller typed, paused, typed again. Her eyes shifted toward the glass office at the corner of the lobby. "I'm going to get our branch manager," she said. Naomi tilted her head slightly. "Is there a problem?" "It's just protocol." Moments later, a tall white man in his late 40s stepped out of the office. His suit was charcoal gray. His handshake was firm but measured. "Richard Coleman," he said. "Branch manager, Naomi Reed." His eyes scanned her face briefly before turning to the computer screen. "Yes, I understand you're requesting a significant withdrawal." "That's correct." "For what purpose?" Naomi blinked once. "A property acquisition." He nodded slowly. "I see." Silence lingered longer than it needed to. Then his expression changed. "I'm afraid this account has been flagged." Naomi didn't move. "Flagged for what?" "Unusual activity. I run 3 companies," she replied evenly. "Large transfers are not unusual." "Yes, but the pattern suggests potential risk indicators." "Risk indicators, possible fraud." The word landed loudly despite his calm tone. A man in line behind Naomi shifted his weight. A woman nearby subtly leaned closer. Naomi folded her hands over her folder. "I assure you," she said, "there is no fraud." Richard's voice grew more official. "Until we complete a review, I cannot authorize this transfer. You're freezing my funds. Temporarily." "For how long?" "Up to 72 hours. My closing is in 4. He gave a thin smile. "Then perhaps you should have planned better." The air changed. Naomi's gaze sharpened slightly. "I've banked here for 8 years," she said quietly. "Never missed a compliance request. Never overdrafted. Never disputed." "Yes," Richard replied. "But these things happen." "What things?" He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "We see cases where accounts are built quickly, inflated revenue streams, digital platforms masking my businesses are publicly registered." She interrupted, of course. But his tone suggested something else entirely. 2 uniformed security guards began to drift closer, pretending to adjust their radios. Naomi noticed. "So this is how it works," she said softly. "I'm simply following policy. Policy triggered when certain thresholds are crossed, and those thresholds were never crossed before today." Richard hesitated just for a second. "Ma'am," he said, voice cooling, "we see this pattern often." "This pattern?" "Yes." She held his gaze. "And what pattern is that?" He didn't answer directly. Instead, he said, "Security, please remain nearby." The guards stepped closer. The humiliation was no longer subtle. Whispers grew. "Is she in trouble?" "Fraud, I think." Naomi felt the weight of their stares, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she reached slowly into her handbag. Security stiffened. She pulled out her phone. Richard's jaw tightened. "Recording is not permitted inside the branch." She looked at him calmly. "I'm not recording." She tapped her screen twice, then turned the phone outward. The red live indicator glowed at the top. "Good morning, everyone," she said clearly, her voice suddenly carrying across the marble lobby. "I'm currently at the downtown branch of Harrington and Blythe." Several customers froze. Richard's face paled slightly. "Ms. Reed," he warned. "I'm here to withdraw funds for a commercial purchase," she continued, eyes steady on the camera. "But apparently my account has been frozen for fraud." One of the tellers gasped softly. Richard stepped forward. "You need to turn that off." Naomi angled the phone so both of them were visible. "For transparency," she said gently, "this is Richard Coleman, branch manager." Richard's composure began to crack. Ma'am, this isn't appropriate. Is it? Her phone screen scrolled rapidly as viewers joined. Thousands. Because Naomi Reed wasn't just a business owner. She was the founder and CEO of VaultPay, one of the fastest growing fintech apps in the country. A platform built on transparency designed to prevent exactly the kind of discretionary bias she was now experiencing. And the day before, VaultPay had announced a $40 million integration partnership with Harrington and Blythe Bank, the same bank. Richard realized it. Too late. Comments flooded her screen. Is that HB Bank? No way. This is live. Customers began pulling out their own phones. The guards stepped back. Naomi's voice remained steady. Richard, would you like to explain to my audience what fraud indicators my account triggered? He swallowed. This conversation should be private. You made it public, she replied softly. A bead of sweat formed at his temple. The lobby, once dignified and hushed, now buzzed with electricity. I may have acted prematurely, he admitted. Prematurely. He forced a smile that did not reach his eyes. Your account review can be expedited. How quickly? Immediately. The shift was visible, palpable. He turned to the teller. Process the transfer. Yes, sir, she said quickly. Naomi did not end the live stream. She let it run. The printer word, keys clacked. Silence thickened. Richard cleared his throat. We value all of our clients. Naomi tilted her head slightly. Do you? He had no answer. The certified transfer confirmation slid across the counter. She picked it up without breaking eye contact. For the record, she said to her audience, trust is the foundation of banking. Her gaze flicked back to Richard. And trust is expensive. The live stream ended. She slipped her phone back into her bag. The guards stepped fully away now. Custos stared not at her with suspicion anymore, but with something closer to awe. Richard forced one last attempt at dignity. We look forward to continuing our partnership with VaultPay. Naomi paused at the doors. Partnerships require mutual respect, she said calmly. Then she walked out into the sunlight. By the time she reached her car, the clip was already trending. Inside the branch, Richard stood frozen in the center of the marble floor, aware that the world had just watched him make a decision he could never take back. An hour later, headlines began to appear. VaultPay CEO challenges bank bias live. Bank freezes tech founder account gets exposed. Harrington and Blythe corporate office called within 90 minutes. An internal review was launched before lunch. By closing time, Richard Coleman was no longer branch manager, but Naomi never mentioned his firing. She did not need to. That evening, she stood inside her newly purchased commercial building, sunlight pouring through tall windows, dust dancing in golden beams. Her team gathered around her. You okay? Her crew asked gently. Naomi looked around the empty space that would soon become VaultPay Innovation Hub. I'm fine, she said. Are you angry? She considered the question. No, she replied after a moment. I'm focused on what? Building systems where bias does not get to hide behind policy. Her phone buzzed again, another news request, another interview. She silenced it, because this was never about humiliation. It was about exposure. The next morning, Harrington and Blythe released a statement reaffirming their commitment to diversity and inclusion. Naomi read it once, then set it aside. Statements were easy. Accountability was harder. She walked into her office, glass walls open, light as space, built intentionally transparent. Her reflection stared back at her briefly in the window. Composed, unshaken. They had tried to freeze her assets. Instead, they had melted their credibility. And somewhere in the city, someone watching that live stream realized something powerful. Sometimes the system does not malfunction. Sometimes it reveals itself. And sometimes all it takes is unlocking your phone to make the world see it. The story should have ended there, but it did not. By the time Naomi arrived home that evening, the live stream clip had surpassed 3 million views. News anchors replayed the moment. Richard said, "We see this pattern often." Social media dissected every second, his tone, the guards stepping forward, the subtle shift in his body language when he realized who she was. But Naomi was not interested in viral fame. She was interested in patterns. The next morning, her executive assistant entered her office carefully. "There is something you should see," she said. She placed a tablet on Naomi's desk. It was not news coverage this time. It was emails. Dozens of them. From customers across the country. I tried to withdraw money from my wedding deposit. They flagged me. They questioned how I could afford my own business loan. They froze my account for review after my first big contract. The stories were painfully similar. Different branches, different cities, same language, unusual activity, risk indicators, fraud pattern. Naomi leaned back in her chair. It was not just me, she murmured. Her coup crossed his arms. It rarely is. Vault Pay had been built on algorithmic transparency. Every flagged transaction required documented justification. Every review generated a digital paper trail visible to the customer. No ambiguity, no discretionary whispers, and now the irony felt sharp. The same bank that had partnered with her platform had allowed human bias to override process. Her phone rang. The caller ID read, Harrington and Blythe Corporate Headquarters. She answered calmly. Ms. Reed, a polished voice began, we deeply regret yesterday's incident. The branch manager conduct does not reflect our institutional values. Values, Naomi repeated softly. We would like to invite you to a private meeting with our executive board. And what would we be discussing? A path forward. Naomi's tone remained steady. The path forward is simple. Silence waited on the other end. Transparency, she continued. Independent review of discretionary account freezes. Public reporting metrics. Algorithmic checks on manual flags. That would require structural adjustments. Yes, she replied. It would. Another pause. Are you threatening to withdraw the partnership? Naomi looked out her office window at the city skyline. I'm offering you an opportunity to evolve. By noon, financial analysts were debating the situation on television. Some called it a misunderstanding. Others called it exposure. VaultPay user base surged by 20% in 48 hours. Not because of outrage. Because of trust. Meanwhile, inside Harrington and Blythe Corporate Tower board members sat around a long mahogany table watching the clip again. One director shook his head slowly. Why were guards involved? Banaza asked quietly, why did he assume fraud before verification? No one had a satisfying answer. Back at VaultPay headquarters, Naomi gathered her leadership team. We are launching something, she announced. What kind of something, her CTO asked. A bias audit initiative. The room fell silent. We will provide free account review analytics for any customer who believes they were unfairly flagged by a financial institution. That is going to make waves, someone said carefully. It should, Naomi replied. Her voice was not angry. It was deliberate, because the humiliation in that marble lobby had not been loud. It had been procedural, polite, measured. That was what made it dangerous. 2 days later, Naomi walked back into a Harrington and Blythe building, this time their corporate headquarters. Not alone. Cameras waited outside. Reporters called her name. She did not smile for them. Inside, the boardroom was colder than the branch had been. Executives stood as she entered. The chairman extended his hand. Ms. Reed, thank you for coming. She shook it. Let's begin. Slides were presented. Apologies were reiterated. Commitments were promised. Naomi listened without interruption. When they finished, she folded her hands on the table. You froze my account in public, she said calmly. You called security before evidence. You referenced a pattern without defining it. The chairman nodded stiffly. We acknowledged that. Good, she said. Then she slid a document across the table. Here is what accountability looks like. The proposal outlined mandatory bias training tied to performance metrics, independent oversight, public quarterly reporting on account freezes disaggregated by demographics. A board member shifted uncomfortably. That level of disclosure is unprecedented. So was yesterday live stream, Naomi replied. Silence. After a long moment, the chairman spoke. If we agree to this, will VaultPay maintain the partnership? Naomi met his eyes. If you agree to this, your customers will maintain their trust. The distinction settled heavily in the room. Outside, reporters speculated. Inside, something fundamental shifted. Weeks later, Harrington and Blythe released a comprehensive reform plan aligned almost exactly with Naomi's proposal. Industry analysts called it groundbreaking. Some called it overdue. Richard Coleman's name faded from headlines, but the policy changes remained. One evening, months later, Naomi visited the renovated VaultPay Innovation Hub, the building she had purchased the day her account was frozen. Glass walls reflected the city lights. Young engineers coded at long desks. Ideas moved freely. Her crew joined her at the balcony. Did you ever imagine it would unfold like that, he asked. Naomi considered the question carefully. No, she admitted. Any regrets? She looked out at the skyline again. If I had not unlocked my phone, none of this would have changed. Below them, traffic flowed in steady lines, thousands of people moving through systems they trusted without question. Bias does not always slam doors, she said quietly. Sometimes it just delays them. Hercule nodded, and sometimes she added, you do not fight it with anger. She held up her phone slightly. You fight it with visibility. The city lights shimmered against the glass. The bank still stood downtown, polished and imposing. But its policies were different now. Because one woman had refused to let a quiet accusation stay quiet, and somewhere in another branch, when a large withdrawal request appeared on a screen and a manager hesitated before clicking flag, they thought twice.